Welcome back everyone to the channel, and a warm greeting to all the treasure hunters, curious minds, late-night coin roll searchers, flea market explorers, inherited collection dreamers, and anyone who has ever looked at a simple penny and wondered if it might secretly be life-changing, because today we are diving deep into a story that sounds unbelievable at first but becomes more fascinating the more you explore it. The legendary idea of the 2018 D1 cent that in rare hypothetical circumstances is rumored, imagined, theorized, and passionately discussed as a coin that could be worth up to $15 million due to a perfect storm of minting errors, production mistakes, transitional anomalies, freak accidents, and numismatic possibilities that turn an ordinary copper-plated zinc cent into something closer to a once-in-a-generation artifact. And before anyone rushes to the comments, let's be clear that what makes this topic so engaging is not a single confirmed sale at that exact number, but the combination of known mint error science, historical precedent, collector psychology, and extreme rarity scenarios that show how such a valuation could exist under the right circumstances, because in the world of coins, value is not dictated by face value or even age alone but by rarity, demand, story, condition, and the sheer improbability of survival. And the 2018 D cent sits at a fascinating intersection of modern minting technology and human imperfection, because although modern mints are designed to eliminate errors, when errors do escape they can be more dramatic, more mysterious, and in some cases more valuable than older mistakes due to the assumption that they should not exist at all, and that assumption alone fuels intense collector demand. So imagine a coin struck at the Denver Mint in 2018, a year of massive production numbers where billions of cents were made. Yet among those billions a tiny number may carry mistakes so severe, layered, and complex that they effectively create a new variety or a unique specimen, and one of the most talked about possibilities involves a wrong planchet error, where a cent design is struck on a planchet intended for a different denomination or even a foreign coin, something that should be nearly impossible in a modern facility but has happened before. And if a 2018 D Lincoln cent were struck on a silver planchet, a clad planchet, or an experimental alloy never meant for circulation, and if that coin were authenticated, documented, and graded at a top-tier level, its value would not be measured in thousands but potentially in millions, because it would represent not just an error but a failure of multiple quality control systems simultaneously. Another layer of fascination comes from double die errors, especially extreme double dies where the hubbing process misaligns so dramatically that the date, lettering, or Lincoln's portrait appears duplicated in a bold and unmistakable way. And while minor doubling is common and often dismissed, a major double die on a modern cent would ignite the hobby because it would challenge the assumption that such errors were largely eliminated decades ago. And then there is the realm of off-metal transitional errors, where leftover materials from previous years or test compositions accidentally enter production, something that has happened historically during composition changes. And although 2018 was not officially a transition year, rumors and speculation persist about experimental alloys being tested behind the scenes, and if even one such planchet escaped into circulation and received a 2018 D strike, the resulting coin would be unique, priceless in a practical sense, and valued at whatever the highest bidder is willing to pay, which in elite auction circles could climb into the multi-million-dollar range, especially if two or more billionaire collectors decide they must own it, because value at that level is less about metal and more about ownership of a singular object. Another factor that pushes hypothetical values upward is the concept of a perfect storm error, where multiple mistakes occur on the same coin, such as an off-center strike combined with a broad strike, capped die, struck through foreign material, and dramatic die cracks or retained cud, creating a coin that visually tells the story of chaos inside the minting press. And collectors love stories frozen in metal, especially when those stories are dramatic and visible without magnification. And if such a coin also displays a wrong mint mark placement, missing elements, or a ghost image from a clashed die, it becomes not just an error but a masterpiece of mechanical failure. And condition plays a massive role as well, because a pristine mint state example with blazing original surfaces, full luster, and no post-mint damage multiplies value exponentially, while a circulated example, no matter how rare, will always be limited by wear. So when people talk about a $15 million 2018 D cent, they are imagining a coin that is not only incredibly rare in type but also nearly perfect in preservation, something that survived unnoticed despite being extraordinary, and survival itself is another key factor because modern coins are often dismissed, spent, damaged, or melted, and error coins are frequently lost before anyone recognizes them. So the fewer examples that survive, the more intense the competition becomes, and we cannot ignore the psychological aspect of modern rarity, because collectors are drawn to the idea that something from their own lifetime, something they could theoretically find in pocket change, could be worth more than classic rarities locked away in museums, and that dream fuels searching, speculation, and demand is the engine of value. Another angle involves missing mint marks or altered mint marks. And while most missing mint marks on modern coins are not errors because of how mint marks are applied today, a genuine anomaly involving a misapplied, doubled, or repunched D-mint mark could still capture attention, especially if paired with other confirmed errors. And then there is the realm of struck-through errors involving grease, cloth, metal shavings, or even fragments of other planchets, which can create dramatic voids or raised shapes that permanently alter the design. And if such a struck-through event occurred during an early die state and was repeated consistently for a short run, it could create a rare variety that collectors would chase aggressively. And we also have to consider mule errors, where mismatched dies are paired together, such as a cent obverse with a die intended for a different denomination or a different year, something that has happened before and has resulted in 6- and 7-figure coins, and a modern mule error would instantly become one of the most famous mint mistakes of all time, because it would demonstrate a breakdown at the highest level of die management, and fame itself adds value, because a coin that is written about, debated, photographed, and displayed gains a reputation that transcends its physical form, and that reputation becomes part of what buyers are paying for. Another speculative but fascinating possibility involves prototype or test strikes, coins struck unofficially to test new dies, alloys, or pressures, which are not meant for release but occasionally escape, and such pieces often have undocumented origins, making authentication difficult but also making them irresistible to high-end collectors who specialize in patterns and experimental issues. And if a 2018 D-cent were proven to be such a piece, its value would be limited only by the market at the moment it appears. And we must also talk about the role of grading and certification, because without third-party authentication from top grading services, no coin can achieve extreme valuations, and the process of certifying a coin with unprecedented characteristics would itself become a major event in the hobby, drawing attention, press coverage, and competitive interest. And once a coin becomes known as the finest or only example of its kind, it enters a different economic universe, where auction estimates become suggestions rather than limits, and $15 million, while sounding outrageous to the casual observer, becomes plausible when you consider that unique numismatic items, rare stamps, and singular collectibles have sold for comparable or greater amounts, especially when they combine rarity, story, and desirability. And the Lincoln Cent series in particular has a massive collector base, spanning casual hobbyists to elite specialists, which means any legendary error within that series automatically has a wider audience than an obscure denomination, and that audience translates into bidding power. Another subtle but important factor is timing, because markets are emotional and cyclical, and a coin that appears at the peak of interest in error coins, during a strong collectibles market, and amid media buzz about hidden treasures in pocket change, could achieve a price that seems impossible in a quieter period. And social media, video platforms, and online communities amplify this effect by spreading stories rapidly, turning a single coin into a global sensation overnight. And we cannot overlook the human element of discovery, because a coin found by an ordinary person, a bank teller, a student, a retiree, or a child sorting pennies, carries a narrative that resonates far beyond the hobby, reinforcing the idea that treasure can still be found, and that narrative increases public interest, which in turn increases value. And when all these elements are combined, extreme error type, absolute rarity, pristine condition, authenticated legitimacy, compelling story, massive collector base, media attention, and perfect market timing. Next, 1993 D 1 cent coin. Today we are diving into one of the most fascinating and imagination-igniting topics in modern numismatics, the legendary concept of a 1993 D1 cent that in extremely rare and extraordinary circumstances could be valued at an astonishing $13 million. A figure that sounds impossible at first glance but becomes increasingly intriguing the deeper you travel into the world of mint errors, production anomalies, transitional mysteries, mechanical failures, human oversight, and the powerful psychology of rarity and demand. And this story is not about an everyday 1993 D penny pulled from circulation and magically becoming worth millions overnight, but about the convergence of very specific errors, mistakes, and possibilities that could elevate a single coin into the realm of legendary collectibles. Because in coin collecting, value is never about age alone and rarely about face value, but about rarity, authenticity, condition, story, and the sheer improbability of existence. And the 1993 D Lincoln cent occupies a unique place in this discussion because it was struck during a period of advanced minting technology when errors were supposed to be rare, controlled, and minimal, yet history has proven time and again that even the most sophisticated systems are not immune to failure, and when failures occur in modern coinage they often become more dramatic, more controversial, and more valuable precisely because they were not supposed to happen at all. And that contradiction fuels intense interest among collectors, investors, and historians alike. So let's imagine the foundation of this $13 million valuation beginning with the idea of an extreme wrong planchet error, one of the most powerful value drivers in modern numismatics, where a 1993 D Lincoln cent is struck on a planchet intended for an entirely different denomination or composition, such as a copper planchet meant for a foreign coin, a clad planchet intended for a higher denomination, or even a leftover experimental or test alloy. And while such an event should be nearly impossible in a modern mint environment, documented cases from other years prove it can happen, and when it does, the resulting coin instantly becomes a major numismatic event, because it represents not just a single mistake but a chain of failures across multiple checkpoints. And if such a coin were authenticated and confirmed to be unique or one of only a handful known, its value would escalate rapidly into 7 or 8 figures, especially if the composition itself were unprecedented or tied to a known experimental program. Another layer of fascination and potential value lies in double die errors, particularly extreme double dies created during the hubbing process, where misalignment causes the design elements to be duplicated in a bold, unmistakable way. And while minor doubling is common and often dismissed as mechanical doubling, a true double die with dramatic separation on the date, lettering, or Lincoln's profile would be instantly recognized by specialists and eagerly pursued by collectors, and the rarity of such an error on a 1993 D cent would make it even more desirable because it challenges the assumption that major double dies were largely eliminated by that era. And then there is the captivating possibility of a mule error, where mismatched dies are paired together, such as a Lincoln cent obverse with a reverse intended for a different denomination, year, or even a foreign coin. And mule errors are among the most famous and valuable mint mistakes known, often commanding prices far beyond traditional error coins because they represent an extraordinary breakdown in die management, and a 1993 D cent mule would instantly become one of the most discussed coins of the modern era, attracting attention not just from Lincoln cent collectors but from the entire numismatic community. Another avenue that could push a 1993 D cent into the $13 million range involves transitional errors, which occur when materials or designs from one era accidentally appear in another. And while 1993 was not officially a composition transition year, the reality of mint operations includes testing, experimentation, and contingency planning that can introduce unexpected materials into the production environment. And if a 1993 D cent were struck on an experimental alloy or a leftover planchet from a discontinued composition, and if that fact could be scientifically verified, the coin would transcend typical error status and become a historical artifact, representing a moment of experimentation or transition never intended for public release. And collectors place enormous value on such pieces because they reveal hidden chapters of mint history. Another compelling possibility is the existence of a perfect storm error, where multiple major errors occur on the same coin, such as an off-center strike combined with a broad strike, struck through foreign material, capped die impressions, dramatic die cracks, retained cuds, and severe misalignment, creating a coin that visually captures the chaos inside a minting press at the moment of failure, and coins like this are prized not only for their rarity but for their storytelling power, because they allow collectors to see and understand the minting process through its breakdowns. And if such a coin were preserved in near-perfect condition, with strong luster and minimal post-mint damage, its value would increase exponentially, because condition is a multiplier in numismatics, and a flawless or near-flawless error coin is exponentially rarer than a worn one, and preservation itself becomes part of the mystery, because how does such an extraordinary coin survive unnoticed while countless ordinary coins are damaged, spent, or destroyed? And that question fuels fascination and demand is the engine that drives prices upward. Another aspect that cannot be ignored is the role of third-party grading and authentication, because without professional verification no coin can reach extreme valuations, and the process of certifying a previously unknown or unprecedented error would itself become a landmark event, drawing attention from collectors, dealers, auction houses, and media outlets. And once a coin is encapsulated, graded, and recognized as unique or finest known, it enters a different economic realm, where auction estimates become speculative and bidding becomes emotional, and emotions play a massive role in high-end collecting, because at that level buyers are not just purchasing metal, they are purchasing history, exclusivity, and prestige, and the Lincoln Cent series in particular has one of the largest and most passionate collector bases in the world, spanning casual hobbyists to elite specialists, which means any legendary error within that series automatically has a vast audience, and a vast audience translates into competitive bidding. Another factor that supports the idea of a $13 million valuation is precedent, because while such prices are rare, they are not unheard of in the broader world of collectibles, and unique coins, rare stamps, and singular artifacts have sold for comparable or greater amounts when rarity, story, and demand align perfectly. And the story of a modern penny worth millions is especially powerful because it challenges assumptions and captures public imagination. And public imagination amplifies demand through exposure, discussion, and fascination, and we live in an era where stories travel instantly through video platforms, forums, and social media, turning obscure discoveries into global sensations overnight, and a 1993 cent with unprecedented errors would dominate conversations, headlines, and debates, further fueling its desirability. And the human element of discovery also adds intangible value, because a coin found by an ordinary person in circulation, a bank roll, a collection inherited from a relative, or a forgotten jar of change carries a narrative that resonates deeply, reinforcing the idea that treasure can still be found in everyday places, and that narrative draws people into the hobby and increases overall interest, which indirectly supports higher valuations. Another subtle but important element is timing, because markets fluctuate, and a coin that appears during a strong collectibles market, amid heightened interest in error coins and alternative investments, could achieve a price that seems impossible during quieter periods, and high-end buyers are often motivated by a combination of passion and strategy, seeing unique coins as both cultural artifacts and stores of value, and when only one example exists, ownership itself becomes a form of power within the collecting world, and power commands a premium. And when all these elements are combined, extreme rarity, unprecedented error type, pristine condition, authenticated legitimacy, compelling story, massive collector base, media amplification, and perfect market timing, the idea of a 1993 1 cent reaching a $13 million valuation becomes a theoretical possibility rather than a fantasy, not a promise and not a guarantee, but a demonstration of how value is created and magnified within numismatics. And that is why collectors continue to search, study, debate, and dream, because every once in a while history reminds us that mistakes can become masterpieces, that accidents can become legends, and that even the smallest coin can carry the biggest story, and that is what keeps this hobby alive, exciting, and full of possibility, and why the next time you see a simple 1993 penny. Next. 1984 1 cent coin, Today we are stepping into one of the most fascinating and endlessly discussed ideas in modern numismatics, the incredible possibility of a 1984 1 cent that under extraordinary circumstances could be valued at an astonishing $12 million, a number that sounds unreal until you begin to understand how minting errors, production mistakes, transitional mysteries, mechanical failures, human oversight, and collector psychology can converge to transform an everyday coin into a legendary artifact. And this is not about the average 1984 cent that passes unnoticed through millions of hands, but about the rarest scenarios imaginable where a single coin escapes the mint carrying features that were never meant to exist, because in the world of coin collecting, value is created not by face value or even age alone, but by rarity, demand, condition, documentation, and story. And the story of the 1984 1 cent is especially compelling because it comes from a time when the United States Mint had already transitioned to copper-plated zinc cents, a change that itself introduced new variables, vulnerabilities, and opportunities for error, and one of the most powerful drivers behind the $12 million valuation theory is the existence of dramatic double die errors, especially the famous 1984 doubled ear variety, which already commands strong prices in circulated and uncirculated grades. But when collectors imagine a hypothetical ultra-extreme double die, far beyond the known examples, with dramatic separation across Lincoln's portrait, lettering, date, and ear, the value potential multiplies rapidly, because such an error would represent a breakdown in the hubbing process so severe that it should have been caught immediately, and yet history shows that even glaring mistakes can slip through, and when they do they become touchstones of the hobby. And if such an extreme double die existed in pristine condition, graded at the highest levels, it would instantly become the centerpiece of any Lincoln cent collection, and competition for ownership could drive prices into the multi-million-dollar range. Another deeply intriguing possibility involves wrong planchet errors, where a 1984 cent is struck on a planchet intended for a different denomination, composition, or even a foreign coin. And during the early years of the copper-plated zinc cent there were significant logistical challenges in separating materials, and documented cases exist of cents struck on dime, quarter, or foreign planchets, and if a 1984 cent were struck on a solid copper planchet from an earlier era, or on an experimental alloy being tested internally, the resulting coin would represent a transitional anomaly of enormous importance, because it would blur the line between officially issued coinage and experimental production. And such pieces are coveted not just for their rarity but for what they reveal about mint operations behind the scenes, and when rarity meets mystery, value skyrockets. Another layer of potential value lies in off-metal errors combined with other mistakes, because a wrong planchet alone is rare, but a wrong planchet combined with a double strike, off-center strike, or capped die impression creates a unique specimen that cannot be replicated, and uniqueness is the ultimate currency in high-end collecting, because when only one example exists, the price is determined not by guides but by desire, and desire can reach extraordinary levels when multiple wealthy collectors decide that ownership equals prestige. Another powerful category of error involves mule coins, where mismatched dies are paired together, such as a Lincoln cent obverse with a reverse from a different denomination or year, and mule errors are among the most famous and valuable mistakes in numismatic history because they represent systemic failure at the die pairing stage. And a 1984 cent mule would instantly become one of the most studied and debated coins ever discovered, drawing attention from specialists across multiple series, and attention itself adds value by creating narrative and notoriety. And then there are struck-through errors, where foreign material such as grease, cloth, metal fragments, or debris interferes with the strike, leaving voids, raised shapes, or missing design elements. And while minor struck-through grease errors are common, a dramatic struck-through event involving a large foreign object can create a coin that looks almost sculptural, telling the story of the moment it was struck. And if such a coin also exhibits strong doubling, off-centering, or die damage, its visual impact and storytelling power would place it in a category far beyond typical error coins, and collectors pay premiums for coins that visually communicate their rarity without explanation. Another fascinating possibility is the existence of a transitional error involving leftover bronze planchets from before the copper-plated zinc transition, and while the official transition occurred earlier, history has shown that leftover materials can remain in production environments longer than expected, and if even a small number of such planchets were struck in 1984, especially at a particular mint, the resulting coins would represent an unintended continuation of an obsolete composition. And such anomalies are highly prized because they challenge official narratives and documentation, and challenge fuels debate, and debate fuels demand. Another important factor in the $12 million valuation scenario is condition rarity, because error coins are often mishandled, spent, or damaged before anyone recognizes their importance, and a coin that survives in near-perfect mint state condition despite carrying dramatic errors is exponentially rarer than a worn example, and condition acts as a multiplier, not an additive factor, meaning a small increase in grade can result in a massive increase in value, and a flawless or near-flawless example of a legendary error becomes almost mythical, and myths command premiums. Another essential component is authentication and grading, because no coin can achieve extreme valuations without professional verification, and the process of authenticating an unprecedented 1984 error would itself become a major event, involving metallurgical testing, die study, and peer review. And once confirmed and encapsulated by a top-tier grading service, the coin's legitimacy would be cemented, allowing it to enter elite auctions and private sales where 7- and 8-figure prices are possible, and the Lincoln Cent series itself plays a crucial role in this discussion because it is one of the most widely collected series in the world, spanning generations, budgets, and expertise levels. And a legendary error within such a popular series has a much larger pool of potential buyers than an obscure denomination, and a larger pool increases competition, and competition drives prices upward. Another subtle but powerful factor is the human story behind discovery, because a coin found by an ordinary person in circulation, a bank roll, a jar of change, or an inherited collection captures the imagination of the public, reinforcing the idea that treasure can still be found, and that narrative spreads rapidly through modern media, attracting attention far beyond traditional collecting circles, and attention creates demand from people who may not even be traditional collectors but want to own a piece of modern legend, and modern legends can command prices that defy conventional logic. Another element that supports the idea of a $12 million valuation is historical precedent, because while rare, there are coins, stamps, and artifacts that have sold for comparable or greater amounts when they are unique, iconic, and culturally resonant. And the idea of a penny worth millions resonates deeply because it subverts expectations and symbolizes the power of knowledge and curiosity. And in an era where alternative investments are increasingly popular, unique collectibles are seen by some as stores of value as well as cultural artifacts, and when only one example exists, ownership becomes exclusive, and exclusivity commands a premium. Another aspect to consider is timing, because markets are cyclical, and a legendary 1984 error appearing during a strong collectibles market, amid heightened interest in error coins and viral stories about hidden treasures, could achieve a price that seems impossible in a quieter time. And auction dynamics also play a role, because when two or more determined buyers compete, prices can escalate rapidly beyond estimates, and at the highest levels emotion, pride, and legacy become powerful motivators, and legacy collectors are often willing to pay extraordinary sums to secure a place in history. And when all these elements come together, extreme rarity, unprecedented error type, pristine condition, authenticated legitimacy, compelling discovery story, massive collector base, media amplification, and perfect market timing, the concept of a 1984 1 cent reaching a $12 million valuation becomes a theoretical possibility rather than pure fantasy, not something to be expected from any random coin, but something that illustrates how value is created in numismatics, and why collectors continue to search, learn, debate, and dream, because every so often history reminds us that mistakes can become masterpieces, that accidents can become icons, and that even the smallest coin can carry the biggest story, and that is what keeps this hobby alive, exciting, and endlessly fascinating, and why the next time you come across a simple 1984 penny, last 1989 1 cent coin, today on the channel where hidden history, rare discoveries, and unbelievable coin stories come alive, and today we are diving deep into one of the most fascinating and mysterious stories in the world of American coin collecting, a story that sounds impossible at first but has captured the imagination of collectors, treasure hunters, and everyday people alike. The story of a simple 1989 1-cent coin that under extraordinary circumstances can be worth as much as $10 million. A value so shocking that it forces us to rethink everything we believe about pocket change, because this is not just about copper and zinc, it is about human error, rare manufacturing mistakes, timing, survival, demand, condition, and the powerful psychology of rarity. And as we begin this journey, imagine holding a single penny in your hand, something most people would ignore, drop into a jar, or leave behind on the street, yet within that tiny coin could be a combination of errors so rare and so extreme that collectors would fight to own it, museums would want to display it, and auction houses would whisper about it. And to understand how a 1989 1-cent could ever reach a value of $10 million, we must first understand what normally makes a penny ordinary, because in 1989 the United States Mint produced billions of 1-cent coins across its facilities, primarily Philadelphia and Denver, using the standard Lincoln Memorial design, with a zinc core plated in copper. Weighing 2.5 grams, struck at high speed by massive presses designed for efficiency rather than perfection, and under normal circumstances these coins are worth exactly 1 cent, or maybe a few cents in uncirculated condition. But the mint is a place where machines operate at incredible speed, humans oversee complex systems, and metals are prepared in massive quantities, and in that environment, mistakes are not only possible, they are inevitable, yet most mistakes are caught, corrected, or destroyed before coins ever leave the mint, which is why the few that escape become legends. And when we talk about a $10,001,989 penny, we are not talking about a single small error, but rather a perfect storm of multiple rare mistakes occurring together in one surviving coin, something so unlikely that it borders on miraculous, starting with the possibility of a wrong planchet error, one of the most valuable types of mint mistakes, where a coin is struck on a metal blank intended for a completely different denomination or even a different coin series altogether. And in the late 1980s the mint was producing not only pennies but nickels, dimes, quarters, and even foreign coins under contract, meaning that blanks of different compositions could theoretically be present in the same facility. And if a 1989 penny were struck on a planchet intended for a different metal, such as a bronze alloy not used for pennies after 1982, or even a foreign planchet with a completely different composition and weight, the value would skyrocket instantly, especially if the coin also showed full design details, correct alignment, and no signs of post-mint tampering, because collectors pay extraordinary premiums for coins that prove the mint accidentally created something it was never supposed to make. And now imagine that same wrong planchet error combined with a double die error, another legendary category where the die itself was improperly manufactured, causing the design to be doubled in dramatic fashion. Not the flat shelf-like doubling of machine errors, but true hub doubling where letters, numbers, and devices appear clearly duplicated. And if the date 1989 showed strong doubling, especially on the digits or on Lincoln's profile or inscriptions, that alone could create a 6 or 7-figure coin in perfect condition. But when combined with a wrong planchet, the rarity multiplies, not adds, because now you are dealing with two independent errors occurring together. And then imagine adding a third layer of rarity, a missing or partial mint mark error, where a coin struck at Denver might show no mint mark at all due to a filled or damaged die, or even show an incorrect mint mark punched or engraved into the die, something extremely rare in the modern era, because by 1989 mint marks were part of the master die rather than hand-punched, making any anomaly in the mint mark highly suspicious and highly valuable if authenticated, and authentication is critical here, because a $10 million coin would require verification by multiple top-tier grading services, metallurgical testing, die state analysis, and historical documentation, all confirming that the coin is genuine, unaltered, and truly the result of a mint error rather than post-mint damage. And beyond wrong planchets and doubled dies, there is the realm of off-metal and transitional errors. And 1989 sits in an interesting period because the mint had already transitioned from solid copper pennies to copper-plated zinc, yet old materials, test blanks, or experimental planchets could theoretically still exist within the system, and if a 1989 penny were struck on an experimental alloy never officially released, or on a leftover bronze planchet from pre-1982 production, that alone would be historic, because it would challenge established mint records and force historians to reconsider what materials were present in minting facilities at the time, and collectors pay extraordinary sums for coins that rewrite history, because owning such a piece is like owning a footnote that becomes a headline. And then consider strike errors, such as multiple strikes, where the coin is struck more than once by the dies, possibly rotated or misaligned between strikes, creating a chaotic and dramatic appearance, and while multiple strikes alone are often collectible rather than priceless, when combined with other rare factors they become exponentially more valuable. Especially if the strikes are clean, well-centered, and visually stunning, and then there are broad strikes, where the coin is struck without a retaining collar, causing it to spread outward and appear larger and thinner than normal, and again, while common as a category, extremely dramatic broad strikes on wrong planchets with double dies and pristine surfaces are almost unheard of, and the value climbs with every additional verified anomaly, and we must also consider the possibility of a mule error, one of the rarest and most famous types of mint mistakes, where dies intended for two different coins are accidentally paired together, resulting in a hybrid coin that should never exist, and while no officially documented 1989 penny mule has been confirmed at the level of $10 million, the theoretical existence of a penny obverse paired with a die from another denomination or even a foreign coin would instantly become one of the most important numismatic discoveries of the century, and collectors, investors, and institutions would compete fiercely for ownership, driving the price into the multi-million-dollar range, especially if the coin were unique, and uniqueness is one of the most powerful drivers of value in the coin world, because when there is only one known example, price becomes less about market trends and more about personal desire, prestige, and the willingness of wealthy collectors to pay whatever it takes to own something no one else can, and beyond. The physical errors condition plays a massive role, because most error coins are discovered in circulation after years of wear, scratches, corrosion, and damage, but a $10 million penny would likely need to be in extraordinary condition, possibly uncirculated or even proof-like, with sharp details, minimal marks, and original surfaces, because high-grade error coins are exponentially rarer than worn examples, and a flawless error coin is the holy grail, and survival is another critical factor, because even if multiple error coins were produced, most would have been destroyed, spent, or damaged over time, leaving perhaps only one survivor in top condition. And then there is the story, because collectors do not just buy metal, they buy narratives, and a 1989 penny discovered in an unexpected place, such as a forgotten mint bag, an estate collection, or a childhood coin jar that sat untouched for decades, adds emotional weight and public interest, which in turn increases value. Because coins that capture the imagination attract media attention, and media attention attracts bidders, and bidders drive prices higher, and we cannot ignore the role of speculation and possibility, because part of the allure of a $10 million penny is not just confirmed facts but the tantalizing idea that such a coin could exist, encouraging people to search their change, examine their collections, and dream of discovery, and this collective fascination fuels the market, because even rumors of extraordinary errors can increase interest in an entire series, and in the case of the 1989 1 cent, the combination of timing, modern minting technology, and the sheer volume of coins produced creates a paradox, because while errors should be rare due to advanced quality control, the sheer number of coins struck means that even extremely unlikely events can occur, and if just one coin slipped through with a perfect storm of errors, it would become a legend, and the $10 million valuation reflects not just current sales but potential auction scenarios, where two or more ultra-wealthy collectors decide that they must own the coin at any cost, turning an auction into a battle of pride and passion, and history has shown that such battles can push prices far beyond rational estimates, especially when the item is unique and irreplaceable. And then there is the future factor, because coin values are not static.